I'm going to today. A few weeks ago, there was a pastor in California that committed suicide. He was about 30 years old. He was from the Harvest Community Fellowship in California. The church has about 15,000 members. It's not Adventist. It's actually the 8th largest church in the United States. And this pastor, his name was Jared Wilson. He was actually, one of his main ministries in the church was actually suicide prevention. And unfortunately, for some reason or another, he decided to take his own life. Suicide's had a large impact on my family's life. My father-in-law committed suicide. My brother-in-law committed suicide. My wife grew up suicidal. My father had attempted suicide many times. So that struggle has been very close to my family for a very long time. But suicide itself is not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about some things that were said after this young pastor committed suicide. He was the associate pastor of his church, and to kind of give you an idea of some of the influence this young man had, he had about 250,000 Facebook followers. Now, to people my age, that gives you some inclination. To the younger people, what's Facebook? But the senior pastor of that church has about 1.3 million followers on Facebook. So that's a pretty good size audience. And then this tragedy struck national headlines. People all over the country, probably all over the world, were hearing about this young pastor. I want to point out a quote that I had heard, or that I had read, by the senior pastor of this church. He says, "One dark moment in a Christian's life cannot undo what Christ did for us on the cross." Romans reminds us that nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Would we as Adventists agree with that statement? Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ? Nothing can separate His love for us. That's a true statement. He goes on to say, at times like this, we must remember that as Christians, we do not live on explanations, but on promises. We fall back on what we do know, not on what we don't know. We do know that Jared put his faith in Jesus Christ, and we also know that he is in heaven now. Now, as Adventists, would we agree with that statement? No, our understanding of death says that he's what? He's sleeping, not that he's in heaven now. Now, I hear these comments all the time, and I typically don't think much of it. But I read another quote, or another statement on Facebook that made me think about this a little further. And it's this: it is disturbing, but we need to be aware that people are going to lead people astray intentionally. Studying about Balaam really opened my eyes to whom wicked people and prophets really are. Balaam did everything he could to divert the children of Israel away from God to worship idols. Pastor Greg Laurie is doing the same. He's doing all he can do to keep his members satisfied, and he's advocating suicide. He says, if you can commit suicide to get out of this life's problems, you will go straight to heaven to live an eternity of peace. I can see suicide rates in the church community increasing, especially among the youth. After I read that, it made me think, that's true. I don't know if this pastor is intentionally deceiving his members or not. I don't know that. But what I do know is advocating that if we commit suicide, then we get to go straight to heaven. That's not a good thing. It's not a positive thing. When someone's struggling, when they're dealing with something so powerful in their lives that they can't find a way out, we don't want to advocate that the way out for that is to just kill themselves. So it made me think, if it was intentional, and I don't know. So I was looking for other examples of people throughout history that maybe unintentionally misled others or intentionally misled others. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Martin Luther. Everybody knows who Martin Luther is, right? That's pretty common in Adventist teachings even. Do we think that Martin Luther was ignorant or deceptive? Let me point out a couple of things to you real quick, and let me see what you think. Martin Luther, he hung the 95 Thesis, right? And kind of the three main points of that thesis were selling indulgences to finance the building of St. Peter's Church was wrong. We'd agree with that, right? We shouldn't sell indulgences, if I could pronounce that. He actually went on to say that if the Pope just used the money that he had, he could build the church himself and wouldn't even need anybody else's money, that the church already had the money it needed. He also says that buying indulgences gives people a false sense of security and endangers their salvation. I think we could agree with that too. Now here's another statement that he says. The Pope has no power over purgatory. We don't typically talk about that when we talk about Luther, do we? See, Luther believed in purgatory. Do we as Adventists believe in purgatory, a place we go to wait, where it's kind of in between heaven and hell? Another thing that Luther did not believe in was the seventh-day Sabbath. He actually went on to say that he really didn't see that the Sabbath itself, because they practiced on the Lord's Day, was all that important. Do you think Luther was ignorant to that? Or do you think he was intentionally deceptive? No, I can't judge his heart, but I think that he was ignorant to that. And Ellen White actually said that he just didn't have that light yet, that he wasn't given that light. And people throughout history, as we learn, we gain more light. Now, I did find an example in the Bible of someone who wasn't really ignorant, but was very deceptive. And that brings us to Numbers chapter 22. And that'll be our main focus this morning. So Numbers 22, verse 1 reads, Then the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab, on the side of Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many. And Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. Right before this, the children of Israel had went to battle with another nation. There was the nation of Bashan, and the king was Og. It was actually just before this. They were the race of the giants, the last race of giants. So the Israelites had just defeated giants, and now they're settling down in another kingdom. So Balak was scared. And so in verse 4, so Moab said to the elders of Midian, Now this company will lick up everything around us, as an ox looks up the grass of the field, and Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites at the time. Then he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, Look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they are covering the face of the earth, and are setting next to me. Therefore, please come at once. Curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. And he said to them, Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Now Balaam was a prophet of God. And I think right here is where he makes his first mistake. See, this kingdom comes and says, I want you to curse God's people, and you are a prophet of God. I would think that your first instinct would just be, no, go away. Or turn around. Maybe he had to be respectful. So, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have the desire to do that. I don't want to curse God's people. Those are my people. But that's not what he does. He tells them to stay the night. Verse 9, then God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Now God knew who these people were. He was saying to Balaam, what are you doing? What are you thinking? So Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, look, a people has came out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come now, curse them for me. Perhaps I should be able to overpower them and drive them out. And God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse them, the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the prince of Balak, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. So that should be end of story. But it's not. Balak was a little more persistent. Then Balak again sent princes more numerous and more honorable than they, and they came to Balaam and said to him, thus says Balak, the son of Zippor, please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will certainly honor you greatly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Therefore, please come and curse this people for me. And then Balaam said, no, go away, leave me alone. No, he didn't. He should have. Then Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God, to do less or more. Now therefore, please, you also stay here tonight, that I may know what the Lord will say to me. Why do you suppose he's having them spend another night? He's already asked God what to do. God's already told him no. Well, I think it mentions something here that might give you a little hint. It mentioned a house full of silver and gold. Balaam's being tempted by riches. He was tempted by honor too when they sent all those princes to see him. So verse 20 says, and God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word I speak to you, that you shall do. So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the prince of Moab. Did you catch that? It didn't say that when Balaam got up in the morning that they called to him and told him to come with. Balaam just got up and went. It's not what God told him to do. God told him to wait for them to call him. Then God's anger was aroused because he went. And the angel of the Lord took his hand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's anger was aroused, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey and said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have abused me, I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you. So the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I became yours to this day? Was I ever disposed to do this to you? And he said, no. Can you believe Balaam's having a conversation with a donkey? Can you believe he's just not freaked out by this? Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would have killed you now and let her live. Isn't that interesting? The donkey was protecting him. And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know you stood in the way against me. Now, therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back. Why do you suppose the guy was there in the first place? The angel with the sword was there in the first place. He was already displeased with him. He was already mad that he was even trying to go. But Balaam says, well, unless it makes you mad, I can just go. It'll be okay. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, Go with the men, but only the word I speak to you, that you shall speak. So Balaam went with the prince of Balak. There's another important part of the story there too, is God lets him go. The angel moves out of the way, allows Balaam to pass, but he tells him that you have to say what I tell you to say. Now, I could tell you that you have to say what I tell you to say, and you could still say whatever you want. But if God tells you this is the only thing you can say, then you have no power to do anything other than that. But Balaam continues. So Balak heard that Balaam was coming, and he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the borders of Arnon, the boundary of the territory. Then Balak said to Balaam, Did I not earnestly send to you, calling for you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you? And Balaam said to Balak, Look, I have come to you. Now, have I any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kirjath-Huzoth. Then Balak offered oxen and sheep, and he sent some to Balaam and to the princes who were with him. So now Balaam's all ready. He's with Balak, and they're getting ready to, let's just read. Verse 41, So it was the next day that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, that from there he might observe the extent of the people. So he took him up on the hill, or on the mountain, so that Balaam could see the encampment of Israel, so that he could see this great nation that was going to destroy Balak. What Balak doesn't know is that actually the Israelites were told not to start a fight. They were told just to camp there. They weren't even enemies at this point. But Balak didn't know that. Then Balaam said to Balak, Build 7 altars for me here, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balak did just as Balaam had spoken. And Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. How many times have we read in the Old Testament where God's okay with pagans joining in the offering system? Are they allowed to sacrifice to God? No. But for some reason, Balaam decides to bring Balak in on this. So then Balaam says to Balak, Stand by your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I will tell you. So he went to a desolate height, and God met Balaam. And he said to him, I have prepared the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. Then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, Return to Balak, and thus you shall speak. So he returned to him, and there he was, standing by his burnt offerings, he and all the princes of Moab. And he took up his oracle, and he said, Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east, Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how shall I denounce who the Lord has not denounced? From the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of righteousness, and let my end be like his. Then Balak said to Balaam, What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have blessed them bountifully. Isn't that kind of funny? I sense some irony here. Balak put all this effort into getting Balaam there to curse the people, and what's Balaam do? He blesses them. So he answered and said, Must I not take heed to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth? You know, Balaam's been given a lot of opportunities to this point to do the right thing, but he just can't seem to do it. Then Balak said to him, Please come with me to another place from which you may see them. You shall see only the outer part of them, and shall not see them all. Curse them for me from there. Why do you suppose he did that? Initially, he took them so he could see probably all of the Israelites, all of the tents. But now he takes them to the outer parts so he can only see part of it. Maybe Balak's hoping that, well, God won't let him curse all of the people. Maybe he'll let him curse just some of them. And then he can, have a better chance at battle. So he brought him to the field in Zophim, to the top of Pisgah, and built 7 altars, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. And he said to Balak, Stand here by your burnt offering, while I meet the Lord over there. Then the Lord met Balaam, and put a word in his mouth, and said, Go back to Balak, and thus you shall speak. So he came to him, and there he was, standing by his burnt offering, and the princes of Moab were with him. And Balak said to him, What has the Lord spoken? Then he took up his oracle and said, Rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. He has said, and he will not do. Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, I cannot reverse it. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. For there is no sorcery against Jacob, nor any divination against Israel. It now must be said of Jacob and of Israel, Oh, what God has done. Look, a people rises like a lioness, and lifts itself like a lion. It shall not lay down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain. Then Balak said to Balaam, Neither curse them at all, nor bless them at all. See, before he was angry because he blessed them. Now he just stop. He just wants him to stop because he's making it worse. So Balaam answered and said to Balak, Did I not tell you, saying, All that the Lord speaks that I must do? I've already said it. You would think that Balaam would have given up by now. I mean, he already knows he can't say what he wants to say because Balaam wants to curse his people. He wants the riches and the honor that Balak's offering. And he keeps trying and trying. Is he trying to trick God? Then Balak said to Balaam, Please come, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God that you curse them for me from there. So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor that overlooks the wasteland. Then Balaam said to Balak, Build for me 7 altars, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balak did as Balaam had said, and offered a bull and a ram on every altar. Now, when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek the use of sorcery, but he set his face towards the wilderness. And Balaam raised his eyes and saw Israel encamped according to the tribes. See, Balaam did something different this time. The other times, he went out to be alone to seek the counsel of God. This time, he stayed right where he was at with the other people. He's hoping that God won't come to him. He didn't go out and searching for the Lord. He's hoping that he could just leave God out of it this time and he could go curse the people. But that's not what happened, because the Spirit of God came upon him. And then he took up his oracle and he said, "The utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, the utterance of the man whose eyes are open, the utterance of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with his eyes wide open. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens by the riverside, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. He shall pour water from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. He shall consume the nations, his enemies. He shall break their bones and pierce them with his arrows. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? Blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you." Then Balak's anger was aroused against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak said to Balaam, "I called you to curse my enemies, and look, you have bountifully blessed them these 3 times. Now, therefore, flee to your place. I said I would greatly honor you, but in fact, the Lord has kept you back from honor." So Balaam says to Balak, "Did I not also speak to your messengers, whom you sent to me, saying, if Balak were to give me a house of silver and of gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord, to do good or bad of my own will? What the Lord says that I might speak. And now indeed I am going to my people. Come, I will advise you what this people will do to your people in the latter days." So finally, it's not Balaam that gets tired of trying to trick God. It's Balak that gets sick of Balaam blessing the people that he wanted him to curse. Balaam was trying so hard to figure out a way that he could curse the Israelites so that he could get the honor that Balak was offering. But he just couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. God wouldn't let him. So Balaam offers him one more prophecy for him, for free this time. And he says, "The utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, and the utterance of the man whose eyes are open, the utterance of him who hears the words of God and has the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes wide open. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy the sons of tumult. And Edom shall be a possession, a seer also. His enemies shall be a possession, while Israel does valiantly. Out of Jacob one shall have dominion, and destroy the remains of the city." Then he looked on Amalek, and he took up his oracle and said, "Amalek was first among the nations, but shall be last until he perishes." Then he looked on the Kenites, and he took his oracle and said, "Firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in the rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be burned. How long until Asher carries you away captive?" And then he took his oracle and said, "Alas, who shall live when God does this? But ships shall come from the coast of Cyprus, and they shall afflict Asher and afflict Eber, and so shall Amalek until he perishes." So Balaam rose and departed, returned to his place. Balak also went his way. So originally, God, in this situation, didn't intend for Israel to attack the Moabites. He had told him to just go there and encamp. But because Balak had put so much effort into trying to convince Balaam and trying to get God to help him destroy it, he ultimately made himself an enemy. And this prophecy comes true. The Moabites eventually are defeated. But not before Balaam makes a little more progress. See, Balaam gave them some advice on how to defeat the Israelites. Balaam told him that, it's in chapter 31, verse 16. It says, "Look, these women caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord." See, Balaam ended up telling him how to defeat the Israelites. And it wasn't through battle. It wasn't through being cursed. Balaam told him to send the women in to the Israelite camp to seduce the men. So the women went to be with the men and brought their idols with them and caused a plague on the land. So ultimately, Balaam was successful. So successful that he's actually mentioned in Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. I can find that real quick. "But I have a few things against you, because you have there those among you who hold the doctrines of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality." Now, after reading all that to you, do you think Balaam was ignorant or intentionally deceptive? He was intentionally deceptive. Now, as I mentioned before, I don't know if this pastor from California is intentionally deceptive or if he's just ignorant. It's not my place to judge that. But what I do know is that he's teaching things that aren't true. And those could have disastrous effects on our communities. And that's why it's important that we teach our children, that we teach our friends and our family what the truth is. That there isn't relief from the pain just through killing ourselves. Now, as time continues on, we have to be more and more worried about false teachers. I think there'll be a time when you have to worry, and maybe it's even now, about the people that stand in our pulpits, about the people that teach our classes. We can't just assume because they have the name Adventist that they're going to teach truth. Because Balaam was a prophet of God and intentionally deceived the Israelites. Ezekiel 13:9 says, "My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They will not belong to the council of my people, or be listed in the records of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the sovereign God," or the sovereign Lord. And then Luke 6:26 says, "Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets." And another warning in Matthew, "For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, even possible, the elect." See, there's a lot of examples in the Bible of where there are false teachers and there's false prophets. But I think today we've gotten comfortable and we just assume that people don't do that stuff on purpose. I mean, they're not going to lie to us on purpose, are they? Yeah, they are. They will. We are that selfish as people. There are people out there that are selfish enough that they don't want to lose their money. They don't want to lose their power, their position, their authority. So they'll lie. We have to be aware of that. We can't just trust someone because they're invited to speak from our pulpits. We can't just trust someone because because they've been baptized as Adventist. You know, I was at a church one time where we were getting ready to have a meeting, and there was a huge uproar because the material we were going to use wasn't Adventist, so it couldn't be any good. So because it's Adventist, that's the test? I don't think that's a very good test. I've been in board meetings where they've been discussing Wednesday night Bible study and having books, but making sure that they were Adventist books. Though people didn't read them ahead of time to see if there was truth in them, they just assumed because they were written by Adventists that there's truth. It's dangerous to just use our name as the test for truth. We have to put it to the Bible to make sure that it's truth, and then drop stuff on the floor. Let me give you a couple more examples here. Matthew chapter 16, verse 11 and 12. How is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread, but be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? They that understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but against the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Timothy 4, 3 and 4 says, For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. That's a New Testament warning for us, that we need to be diligent in what we read and what we study, that we need to not just assume because they're in our pulpits that they're telling the truth. We need to check it for ourselves. And another thing that this message told me, that when I first started studying this, was I kind of felt a little guilty because of all the times I had heard family and friends talk about death and never once even considered trying to tell them what the truth was. I always take that stance, well, it's not the right time. And maybe there are times when you shouldn't do it, maybe there are times when you should. But if you never do it, then you've missed the time. Sometimes I feel guilty because I haven't told family or friends that their loved one isn't sitting in heaven playing a harp on a cloud like a naked baby. Because I'm scared. Because I'm afraid what they're going to think of me, instead of worrying about what God's message really is. So my hope from this message is that all of you will take a little bit of time and think about ways that you can talk to your friends and talk to your family about death, about suicide, that God will give you the strength and the words that you need to do that. Because, friends, there are a lot of people out there that are hurting very much. And there are a lot of people out there that are taking advantage of that. And I think we have a responsibility as disciples of Christ to teach or to witness. I don't want to say teach because then you get into people saying it's not my gift to teach. But witnessing is a requirement of a disciple. And witnessing is not a spiritual gift. It's something we're all called to do. It's not like preaching where, some have the gift to preach. Witnessing is just something that disciples are supposed to do. So, our closing hymn today is, I don't know. 326. 326, thank you.